Welcome into another live edition of the Bully Ball Podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. John Lynch speaks. Updates on Brock Purdy, who reported to OTAs, and who on earth is going to be the pick at 11. Steph Sanchez and I will discuss all of that and more right after this. I'm Jason Aponte. That's Steph Sanchez. This is the Bully Ball Podcast, the only podcast that fully endorsed wide receiver Kyle Williams from Washington State first. Just want to make sure we get that out the way. But Steph, good to see you after a week off. Felt like there wasn't much to talk about, but this entire week, it's a lot of topics, a lot of things are going on again.
For sure. Well, for one, I knew you were going to slip in some reference of, our draft fave, Kyle Williams. And, obviously we're happy to hear the 49ers had a 30 visit with him. The agenda, the narrative is very much still alive. But yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, like this week is the week. I mean, we've all been waiting for, we've all been discussing for several months now. We're getting little nuggets and pieces of information that are helping us kind of put the pieces together as to who the 49ers may pick. I think we've got a narrowed down list of names that, make a lot of sense for the team that, I'm excited for some, a little worried about others, but that's something we could talk about later.
Yeah, 100%. And this entire week is just reading tea leaves and everything as well, too. And just who's been here, who's come in and what are the 49ers looking for? The first question I'm going to ask you, Steph Sanchez, is why does John Lynch hate Shamar Stewart?
Do you think he hates Shamar Stewart? I think
Listen, when you put out a quote that says sometimes the college production, it matters more, who else are you talking about?
I thought it was really funny because I feel like there have been several reports to this point that the 49ers have interest in Shamar Stewart, and that's the name they keep hearing for potential pick at 11. Josh Norris from Underdog said he's heard Chris Kosarek love Shamar Stewart. I mean, not surprising, right? But John Lynch's comment today kind of shut that down, and it was kind of like, I don't care that you like Shamar Stewart. I'm not picking him. So I don't know. Kind of made me feel a little bit better because I do have my reservations about Shamar Stewart and the 49ers picking him. Obviously, a lot of upside, I think, but that's a big if, and that's a big projection for, a team who is needing an instant impact player at pick 11. I don't like the process of having to teach a pass rusher their position, at pick 11. Like, that's just not what I would choose personally. But you know what it did sound like, Jay? Me, sounded like another edge rusher when he asked or when he mentioned something that he covets in edge rushers is someone who can set the edge. Who'd that sound like to you?
That's a good one. Now, see again, nobody can put together the pieces like 49ers fans. I'm going to be honest with you. I could make up some answer right now and try to form some semblance of an answer. I have no idea, Steph. I want you to tell me who you think that is.
I think that's Mykel Williams. I mean, I think he's the best edge setting, pass rusher in this class. And, the run defense is the best part of his game. I think it provides a strong floor. And that's something that a high floor is not really something you're going to get from a guy like Shamar Stewart. You have the potential of the high reward, a high projection, high ceiling. But, I think we're talking about the 49ers needing these instant upgrades at the position. Guys who are going to be able to come in day one, start from day one, and be able to have an impact on your defense. I think that's Mykel Williams more so than I think that's Shamar Stewart at this point. And so, I don't know. To me, it kind of sounded like him. Will he be available at pick 11? I think that's the question. I kind of wonder if the Saints at 9 will pick him up. But if he's there, I'm sure the 49ers will be interested. That's kind of one of the guys, along with Shamar Stewart, that I think makes sense for them there.
100%. And I think, again, defensively is where we're thinking that this is going. I think when you look at what's been narrowed down and what names are there, they're all defensive players one way or another, even if it's someone that you don't like in like a Will Johnson. I think the idea will be defense starting first at pick 11 if the 49ers stay at pick 11, because there's a ton of smoke about the 49ers wanting to trade back. And I think my thing is of course they would love to trade back, but it takes two to tango. Who's trading up is really the real question. And we may have a potential partner in Denver. Now, I would pose this question to you, Steph. If Denver came to the 49ers and said, we'll give you 20 and 51 for 11, do you press play on that?
I'd definitely be intrigued with that, because I think you can probably get a defensive tackle like a Derek Harmon around that range. That makes a lot of sense for the 49ers. And then, with pick 43, the 49ers could also get an edge in that range. And I think they've done homework on some of those guys as well. So yeah, I would pull that trigger. My question is, who do the Broncos want? Like, who are they eyeing? Because I think I've heard a lot about them being interested in running backs. Do they need to
Genty
far for someone like Omarion Hampton?
Yeah.
But if Genty's there, that would very much be in play, I think, if they want to go big on that. But otherwise, I think, kind of what John Lynch said, like, he's not really anticipating a lot of movement. There's more teams that want to trade back than there are teams interested in trading up. And so I think that's going to result in not a lot of movement, although there could be surprises come draft day. There's always a wrench that gets thrown, a surprise that happens. Some players start to fall, and then that's when you start to see some action. But I think right now that I don't really foresee a lot of that. We'll see what happens on draft day, of course.
So the idea that I have with 20 and 51 would be something like Derek Harmon and Landon Jackson. And there you go. Like, you have two guys that potentially will be in those spots for you. I think the intriguing part about this is the difference between the talent level at pick 11 all the way to pick 20, meaning it's negligible. And it's something that's a concern for most of those players that are there, right? The Derek Harmon thing right now, Ben Albright was pretty upfront saying it's medicals. Now it's medicals. And again, how much of this is smokescreen? How much of this is trying to, have this come out to make the guy fall to you, right? Obviously with the idea of Mike Green, it's the off the field stuff. And I think that's what makes this intriguing, right? And more bites at the apple means you'll have a higher success rate, or a higher chance of success, I should say, in landing a guy, right? So it's intriguing that all this stuff is coming out. But again, like, the 49ers definitely want to trade back, but it doesn't mean that someone wants to trade up. And just because you want to trade back doesn't mean that someone has to. And I think that's what the 49ers are kind of exploring now, is just, what are all the possibilities? And I think that's what this entire week is going to be about, is about what are all the possibilities? Are we going to be here? I don't think the 49ers are going to look to trade up, because then that's giving away, draft capital. But I think right now, continuing to build up draft capital, even though you have 11 picks, if that turns into 12 or 13, yeah, your question might be, how do you fit all of these guys on a 53-man roster? And then you end up with like a Jarrett Kingston situation where, you draft somebody and then they wind up moving on because you just don't have enough spots. But I do like the idea of more bites at the apple. So I think this is, if getting a premier player at 11 is at the top of the list of what I want the 49ers to do, then right behind that is trading back and getting more draft capital and getting a shot at other players, because I do think the level from 11 to 20 in terms of the player that you'd be getting, it's negligible. Like, it depends on what you want, right? Like, and I think that's kind of where I'm at with this talent group that's in this range from 11 to 20.
Yeah, and I'm also curious, like, as far as the teams that are interested in trading back that are in front of the 49ers. Just seeing as how there might not be a lot of interest, I think some of those teams would be willing to take less for
Steph,
those
real quick.
picks. Yeah.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Mr. J says trade up for Mason Campbell. What the hell am I talking about? Who the hell is Mason Campbell?
I have gotten a couple names confused as well.
Mason Campbell, the famed defensive tackle, Mason Campbell.
No, Mason Campbell. He's talking about
Mason Graham or Will Campbell. I don't know. I mean, hey, look, if you're going to insult, let's get the names right.
What the hell are you talking about? Yeah, that's
What
funny.
the hell are you
But
talking about, man?
but along those lines, Mason Graham, if he doesn't get picked at pick 5, which I think like within the last month we've probably figured he'd be the pick at 5 for the Jags. If they go a different direction, which now we're hearing maybe they go offense, how far is Mason Graham then going to fall? Because the Jets, are they dead set on going with Membu? I think they might be, and so they might pick Membu. Graham falls another spot. At what point, I wonder, would the 49ers be interested in a move up for a few spots in order to get someone like Mason Graham? That's just something that's crossed my mind. I think they would be willing to trade up depending on what player falls. I also think like if a guy like Abdul Carter made it past those first 3 picks for whatever reason, I don't think that's going to happen, but for whatever reason, like I think 49ers maybe be interested in moving up to 4. I get it. I think you have to have as many shots and draft picks as you need for how many holes that they need to fill. But I also think with all the question marks and risks and some of these, just concerns that we have about some of the players that currently are available or will be available to them at 11, all of them, like there's no like player that's a slam dunk pick at 11. All of them are going to warrant some type of question from the fan base or just even from, draft nicks and whatnot. But, I think if the 49ers wanted someone that has less questions attached to them that, could be an impact player for you right away, then they might explore a trade up. But yeah, I think ultimately more likely that they stand pat or trade back.
100%. And again, all of this stuff during the week is meant to create movement for these prospects and everything as well too, and to see if someone bites. All the front offices, and I think it was Mark Ross of NFL.com who he worked for the Jets, I believe the Giants, and someone else in their front office, and he talked about the process of, yeah, we don't do mocks in the front office, right? But we go through all the scenarios and we base all of our intel on everything about where we think things are going to go. And I think that was really telling. It's really like right now, John Lynch saying, and we can pivot to the other things that John Lynch talked about because there was far more interesting things I think at this point. John Lynch says that the 49ers have 20 players with a first round grade. 20, right? What number did we say that the Denver Broncos have? 20. So there's your 20, right? All the way. So that means you have 20 players and you'll be at pick 20. But when I talked to Mike Tannenbaum about the idea of when you trade up or you trade back, he said, however many spots you trade up or trade back, you better have that amount of players that you like. Meaning if you trade back 8 spots, you better have 8 players that you like, 8 to 10, because you never know what's about to happen. And I thought that was a really interesting way to think about this. So the biggest part is any potential shakeup in the top 10. And what I mean by shakeup is hoping that the New Orleans Saints panic and, there's 3 quarterbacks taken in the top 10. That would be a dream scenario for the 49ers because then a premium player is going to be pushed down the board and it's going to make things more interesting. I'll say this. I want to ask you this question. Do you almost want a lot of these players to come off the board so the 49ers don't have too many options, or they just have a guy that they're just like locked in on? Because I don't want them going like, oh, this guy or this guy, and then they have to decide, right? It's almost like you almost want that decision taken off, and it's almost like the idea of if you have too many options, then you have no options.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the 49ers have 2 to 3 players that they probably like at that spot. And so I think there's a decent chance that at least one of them, one guy we're going to talk about today, Walter Nolan, right? Like, I think he'll most definitely be available for them at 11. So that's almost like your fallback option. Should all the other 2 players or other players that you like had gone in the picks before, should no one be interested in trading up to 11, then you have that option of, okay, like we're happy with Nolan here as well. And so, yeah, I think there are a couple of options. I I don't know if I'd want them to have some of the options that they like to necessarily be taken. Ideally, I want them to get their top option, if they
Right.
could. But, the way that I imagine these teams do their scouting, and when they say they have first round grades, they're counting the obvious ones, right? They're counting the Cam Wards and the Travis Hunter and the Abdul Carters. They're counting the guys that they know they have no chance of getting. They're still on their board as first round picks, and those are just theoretically, right? I'm assuming those guys are on that list. So yeah, I mean, they'll go down and they'll cross out the names that have already been drafted, and ultimately probably come down to the best guy on the board that's available when they pick.
And that's what it's going to all come down to. So, again, the draft is obviously 2 days away, and all of this stuff right now is just, the 49ers doing due diligence, drink, and trying to figure out the intel and figure out who they're convicted in, drink.
He didn't say that today, by the way.
He didn't. He did not. He did not. Yeah. So, hey, look, maybe he's catching on to the joke, but we're going to find out, and again, any potential shakeup, because again, I believe a lot of people are saying like this is going to be a very action-packed draft in terms of reaches and players that you're not expecting to go somewhere. But any sort of shakeup in front of the 49ers only suits to benefit them, because then it'll push players that they already had on their radar hoping that they would fall. They possibly could. But today, offseason program begins. A lot of people showed up. Brock Purdy showed up. Fred Warner showed up. George Kittle didn't show up, but I'm going to tell you why that's a nothing burger. George Kittle never goes to these things, and it's not an issue. Although a report came out, there's good communication with George Kittle is what John Lynch said, but they're far apart on a contract extension, right? That's fine. It's April 22nd. Not really too worried about that. Again, Kittle never goes to these things, and that's even when he had a contract. So you had to assume that this was going to continue. But what does it say about Brock Purdy showing up when he doesn't have the contract, even though, there's steady communication and everything's going there? Because I think it and Trent did show up today as well, too, Stephen pointed out. I think it kind of lends to what I was saying about, I don't know if Brock Purdy is going to be someone who will hold out. I just don't think that's in his DNA, right? And again, this could mean something, this could mean nothing. But I do think it's telling, and it's really cool that Brock Purdy understands, hey, I want to be here to start because we want to get this continuity going. I think that's pretty cool. But I do think that, I just don't think that Purdy's mind is wired to just hold out like that during a time when it's really important for the team to get, really into a familiarity stage.
Yeah, I think it tells you a couple of things. I think for one, it could mean that, things are progressing well and in a good direction with this the contract negotiations with Purdy, that maybe they're close enough that he feels comfortable doing that. But also, I think you're right. And we've talked about it before, and we've seen him working with all these dudes and hanging out with all these dudes this offseason. Kittle, he's been hanging out with Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, getting some work in with them. So I think it tells you, he is really focused and locked in on this year. He's not trying to have, this distraction. He has seen firsthand how that has impacted players in the past, and I don't think he wants to fall victim to that as well. I think he has a lot to prove still, which is crazy to say because, he's been the starter of this team for so many years, and I think at every turn, he's proven something to this team, to this fan base, to the naysayers. But, I think it's obviously a good sign, and I think it's a sign of his character as well, which we already knew was, A1. And maybe he's also hoping that, hey, I am a team player. I am a team captain on this team. I'm going to act like it. And this is just yet another reason why I deserve to be paid this amount, right? So, I think it honestly helps in the negotiations, and hopefully, gets it to close out a little bit sooner.
Yeah, and I'll read John Lynch's direct quote. That's Brock. He's a pro. Brock's very clear-minded and not going to let other people influence what he should be doing. That's one thing everybody respects about Brock. He's done a lot for this organization, and we're grateful for him. Looking forward to having him as our quarterback for a long time. I think there's been some substantiative talk that have this thing going in a good direction. Again, I completely believe that Brock wants to get what he's deserved and what he feels is he's owed. Man, talking is hard. But I do think that he can do that and also be a part of the offseason programs. And I don't think one way or another that it's going to affect or influence that. And that's just always been my belief. Again, what's the belief on? Vibes, just based on how the young man speaks. Again, I'm really just taking an optimistic standpoint here because I'm a naturally optimistic person. But I never really believed that Brock is going to be someone who continues to just hold out, make this about him, and he'll work through the negotiation, let his agent take care of all that, but he wants to be around the guys, and I think that's what this team rallies around with him, is that he is one of the guys, but he is their leader, and I think that this was a really good first step. It was a really nice first step, and it's good vibes to start, right? Even if, let's just say, Brock didn't show up, I wouldn't automatically press panic and I wouldn't lose it, right? But how could you not feel better about him showing up amidst this and all the talk? And especially with, Kyle Shanahan's best friend, saying, they should trade, Brock Purdy to Pittsburgh and what? I mean, if that was going to happen, that should have already happened. Like a draft day trade of the guy that you are expecting to start for you next season, and then you pivot to whatever Mac Jones and whatever plan you have. That doesn't seem like good process, right, Steph?
It's pretty awful. And I hate that these things continue to be said about Brock when the 49ers are even close to getting the deal done with him. I don't think that thought has really crossed the 49ers mind, at least right now that they're in the thick of it with Purdy and trying to get these negotiations done. So it's really just silly. And another thing I'll say as to why I think it might be a little bit different for Purdy, feeling comfortable to work at the offseason program is because, there's slightly less risk for a quarterback than maybe there would be a skill position player to participate at the team's facility. But I mean, you're training is training, whether you're there or, at your own facility. So I guess the injury risk is about the same. But I'll also say, I do hope that this sets a positive precedent in future negotiations that the 49ers have with, other players, that's hey, if you do show up, you will get rewarded. And I do think that's where the 49ers are at. And we call it hardball and what is it? Lowballing players.
Mm-hmm.
Lowballing players.
Lowballing players. That's good. That's a good way.
Speaking of Devontae Adams, that was funny. But, I think with that, they have shown that if you are the kind of player who's going to be a leader, who does everything the right way, and you show up, not just literally, but also figuratively, I think, they've shown that they will reward players. And so Brock Purdy doing that and then having the contract, here soon to show for it, hopefully will set that precedent for other players that they should do the same.
And you know what? Again, based on vibes, nothing more. I do think that the 49ers are more inclined to get this done earlier because it's a quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, edge, wide receiver, right? Those are important. Edge, especially and specifically, I'm obviously talking about Nick Bosa. But quarterback is something that you're not going to mess around with while you're getting closer to training camp and you still don't have it done or you still don't have a resolution or anything like that. I do think they're a little bit more inclined and they're a little bit more motivated to get this done based on the position and how important that position is, because it's the most important in football. So I do think, again, based on vibes, nothing more, that this does feel like we're getting much closer to a resolution here at the end of April than we ever would have suspected with any of the other contract negotiations that have been going on based on positional value. So I do think the 49ers are, I don't want to say they've changed their ways, but I do want to say that they realize who this is and what this quarterback position means and why it's so important to get this done. Also, they realize that this season cannot start slow. There cannot be an acclimation process. There cannot be a time where give them a little while, they'll get rolling. No. Week one, this thing has to be rolling with everybody at training camp, everyone there, everyone getting into the flow. It can't be well, it was a slow week 1. They'll figure it out. And then we're into week 2, week 3, week 4. And it's just like, oh, we're getting there. No. With this schedule based on winning percentage, which is one of the lowest in the league, you have to start right away. So I think there's urgency on the front office's side, not only with the players because they want to just get this thing rolling, but they realize that after last season, we cannot afford to stumble out of the gates in any form or fashion.
Yeah, and I think even like going into the offseason and the attrition that happened, all the guys that left, most of that is on the defensive side. So I think if there's going to be any, patience afforded to the team, it's going to be on the defensive side of the ball, not so much the offense. The offense was mostly untouched. And so, yeah, you do expect that they're going to be able to hit the ground running. That is going to be the stable part of the team, I think, for much of the season. And so, yeah, you're really counting on that. And I mean, we've been saying it, like the 49ers can't mess around with this one, right? And, there's been some reports back and forth about, what the numbers were, what the offers were early on. And, ultimately what Mike Silver said, right, is that like it's heading towards him getting paid over $50 million a year, which that's the market. I think that's fair. And then they'll work out the rest as far as the more important numbers, which I think are the guarantees and all that. But yes, the vibes are great, I think, on this one, which is a good sign for all of us.
And, Puka Nacua believes that if the 49ers pay $50 million for Brock Purdy and not 45, then the window's closed. I didn't realize $5 million was the difference between not being able to produce ice in the concession stands and not being able to employ anyone ever. But hey, Puka Nacua has a really good grasp. Puka Nacua noted salary cap specialist. I wonder how he's going to feel when his contract time is up, and wondering how much he's deserved and everything as well too. That's why you don't count another man's pockets and you don't comment on your contemporaries' money. But neither here nor there. Good vibes, at least for now, on April 22nd about Brock Purdy. Let's move on. George Kittle's not here. I don't have an issue with it, but George Kittle wants a contract extension. 49ers fans want George Kittle to retire as a 49er. George Kittle is still the best tight end in football. All three of those things are true. But Mike Silver reports George Kittle and the 49ers not close to an extension. Again, him not being in the offseason program today is not an issue because he never does the early part of it. And everyone's just going to sit there and say, well, he was at WrestleMania and this and that. It's fine. Like, it's not a big deal. He's a big wrestling guy. We knew that. But Steph, what's your feeling with the Kittle negotiation, and how do you feel that this is going to go moving forward?
I think it's too early to have a feeling on it. But as I said earlier, like I do think at some point I would not be surprised if Kittle does show up before he gets that contract, just to kind of, really be able to nail down the final numbers. But also, like, I think Kittle has done everything the right way. He has showed up on the field. He has showed up for his teammates. He is the epitome of a leader on that team, on that offense. And so I think he's going to be rewarded for it. But the 49ers don't want to show that hand too early, right? So I think, as always, they are going to, start with their low ball offer and kind of chip away at it from there. And, they've done that before with Kittle in the past even. So, yeah, I'm not too worried about it in April. I think they'll definitely get something done. I do think, he'll retire a 49er. I guess, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers are wondering, should the Trey McBride contract extension that he got, he's 25 years old, should that have as much of a bearing on George Kittle, who is 31? Well, you make the great point, Jay, that Kittle's still the top tight end in the game. And so how much does the age really matter in this case? I would say, and I'm sure his camp would say, not much. He should absolutely get paid around that range. So, but I'm sure the 49ers are maybe hoping and maybe making the case for why he should get paid less than that, but those are the typical conversations that take place with these negotiations. I'm not too worried about it right now in April.
Yeah, Kittle definitely is going to have the highest tight end contract when this gets done, right? Like when this gets done, just based on when you look at how close he was to the top of the receiving list of tight ends on like 30 less catches and like 50 less targets than Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, right? And his value obviously goes into his blocking ability, but we all would love for George Kittle to just get the ball more than anybody, right? Like I'm tired of watching other teams spam their really good tight ends and having them just, take over games, and then Kittle be sometimes an afterthought in some of these games. Like, here's an idea. George Kittle's a really good route runner. George Kittle's really good at running with the ball in his hands. Perhaps we should raise his targets just a little bit. It doesn't have to be 160, 170. But if we can get him 30 to 35 more, think about what numbers could be there. So, yeah, I do think that George Kittle wants a top of the market, deal. But I do think the 49ers are telling him, like, hey, man, you're 31. It's like in negotiations, people are going to use whatever leverage they have. And I'm sure they're giving the leverage of, hey, you're 31. How can we pay you? Trey McBride's young. That's why he's getting that amount of money. But ultimately, as long as the 49ers drag this out and it gets longer, they're going to wind up paying Kittle, and they're going to wind up overpaying. So, again, it goes back to kind of what we've talked about, where the 49ers love to make it seem like they're in the business of winning a negotiation, but they haven't won one negotiation yet. Like, none of them. Like, they've dragged it out and then they've overpaid. So the urgency that they have with Brock Purdy is based on him being the quarterback and how valuable the quarterback is. I see this Kittle thing going a little bit further to training camp, if not in training camp. But I will say, if I have confidence that someone can join right away without much playing time in preseason and training camp, it is George Kittle, if that makes you feel a little bit safer.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also agree it is probably going to go into the late summer. Which is annoying. I feel like there's a whole subgenre of off-season content on ESPN, on NFL Network, that's solely around 49ers contract negotiations. Like, literally, they have planned segments. I think they could set their watch to the 49ers having to pay someone and it dragging out all summer. We hope that's not going to be the case for Kittle, but yeah, probably will be. But what's funny about the usage conversation and what you mentioned there is that the 49ers did kind of allude to the fact that they do want to give Kittle more opportunities in the offense this year and free him up a little bit more of those blocking duties by having signed Luke Farrell. I mean, that's the sense I got from Kyle Shanahan's comments at the owners' meetings. And so I think they might have tipped their hand a little bit, and I'm sure, George and his people are going to be using that as leverage. But you're right. They're both sides going to be hanging on to whatever leverage they have. I think Kittle has some pretty good leverage as well.
Yeah, and I think, again, when you consider impact and the fact that you already have a sign of you're going to use me more than pay me. And I completely understand exactly what you're talking about. Again, if George Kittle is not on this roster or is not extended and there's some way that he's on, we riot. This is one of the few times that a player needs to be here, right? 49er fans, analysts, NFL analysts, we have a way of talking about how you can get around the loss of a player, how moving on from a player might be beneficial, right? There is no way to break this down where you'll make any of us feel better about George Kittle not being on this team for the rest of his time. And if you're afraid of signing him to a record-setting contract and then there's some sort of cliff that you think is going to, I don't think you can operate under that assumption based on how he plays, how impactful he's been, and the fact that even though at 31, his career seems like it's going like this, right? Like, he has the record-breaking season in 2018, but his last two seasons, you could make the argument that he's gotten better these last two seasons and it's going up. And how can you be a 31-year-old, expect a cliff, and you're watching a player ascend somehow? So I think all of these things need to be considered. And I think that's the reason that 49er fans would have such a problem with this. I would have a problem with it. I know Steph would. I know, look at Rob's tweet up here. Playing hardball with George Kittle while also cutting and resigning Kyle Juszczyk is peak 49ers. If George isn't on this team, longer than Juice, we riot. Exactly. Right? Like, that's the thing is he needs to stay. He's very vital. And there are no signs of him slowing down despite all history with age for players. And when this cliff comes, he's getting better and he's being more efficient than he's ever been. Even if he had that 1 year where he broke the tight end receiving yards record, he's somehow aging like wine right now. And I think that's what you have to kind of take into consideration, that this isn't just a 31-year-old tight end. This is George Kittle at 31. And that's not the same thing as just your run-of-the-mill or anybody else being 31. So you can't use that same sort of logic based on history instead of looking at the person, and it's not an apples-to-apples comparison.
Jay, do you think there even is a number that we or anyone else would look at for George Kittle? Of course, within the realm of like actual reality that could happen, where we would say that's an overpay. You should never have done that. I'm not sure that there is, like it, and I'm just saying within like what's reasonable, right? Like, but we know that the 49ers look at it like, let's just say, Kittle is saying, I want $20 million a year. And the 49ers are like right now, April 22nd, they're like, absolutely not. We're gonna wait on this. We're gonna sweat it out. And we're gonna chip away at this number, which is our lowball offer instead. Like if George Kittle got paid $20 million a year, would anyone say the 49ers lost this negotiation? I don't think so. We would all just be happy that, one, they got it done, and two, it's for a player who is absolutely worth it, who is at the top of his position. So that's why, like, for all this talk of like the 49ers being so obsessed about winning these deals, getting it done is the win. Like, yes, point blank, period.
Yeah. And the thing is too, is whatever deal Kittle gets, which again, I believe is going to be top of the market record setting, it's only going to just be a little bit more than Trey McBride's number. Like, it's not going to, it's not going to blow that out of the water. Like, the 49ers are not going that high up, but they are going to do that. And again, think about it this way. If for some odd reason George Kittle was available and any team could, make a move for him, but they had to pay him whatever number the 49ers wouldn't, any other team is going to do that. I mean, it would be maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 teams that would be, hey, we're good at tight end, right? Brock Bowers, Trey McBride. I'm sure we could think about someone else that's like, about to draft a tight end that would say, hey, listen, we're just going to roll with this guy for a while. He's cheap. But for the most part, if he became available, how many teams are just going to jump at it and say, you know what, we'll take him off your hands and we'll pay him, whatever it is, because everyone understands how good he is. And when I say how good he is, I mean the best. And I think that's, again, look, this is going to get done. Our prediction is it's going to get done, but this is definitely going to drag into training camp, right? So I just want to prepare everybody for that. That's all.
It's just so funny because we know it's going to get done. And Jay, like, we know it's going to be only just slightly higher from that Trey McBride number. So why not just get it done now? Get it over with. That's the question. But I mean,
that's the $37,000 question. My goodness, man.
We'll have all off season, the rest of this off season to talk about it. I am sure. Can't wait.
And to your point about, a subgenre of content, no matter where you look about the 49ers offseason content is feeding families. And it's not just content creators. It is feeding the NFL Network and ESPN. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's not just, you think that we're the only ones who stand to benefit from any sort of offseason drama? I dare you to watch NFL Network and not see 2 or 3 49ers segments either centered around what they should pay Brock Purdy, how good George Kittle is Trent Williams going to stay, what happens with Fred Warner, all of this stuff. The 49ers are feeding generations with all of this, and it all started with the trade up to number 3. Again, we're not the content creators, the 49ers are the content creators. But speaking of Trent Williams. Trent Williams did report today, and I think that really can calm some nerves about people who didn't know if Trent Williams was going to show up, and if maybe this is or let's show up, maybe even play this year, which I never believed was possible. Again, like, he has a chance to make a substantial amount of money again this year by playing football. So I don't think retirement was never on the table for that. But Trent Williams being there day one, that's also good vibes as well, too, because Trent's another guy, Steph, that I feel like in the same way with George Kittle, regardless of his age at this point, that if he didn't do anything, all offseason, and then showed up for week one, I still feel confident in Trent Williams being that guy. And for me, I think when you're talking about his age, the injury histories, I think it probably behooves the 49ers for him to not really do too much in terms of offseason stuff, just because you want to get him to the finish line and you need him at the end of the season. So thoughts on Trent Williams? Are we vibing? We're so back?
Yeah, I mean, I do think John Lynch had already said that, Trent Williams had told him earlier in the offseason that he was going to play this year. I feel like I did kind of let the fears of other fans kind of get to me, because then I started like getting worried about it. And they're looking at some of these top offensive tackles as well, too. So you kind of wonder, oh my God, is this a Joe Staley situation where like, he's told the team he's changed his mind, which can always happen. Like, guys can change their mind. They're allowed to do that. And maybe that's why they're looking at tackles at 11. But no, I mean, yes, this definitely alleviates concerns for all. And I think also what it tells you, which John Lynch said, they almost have full attendance at the offseason program, which is a great sign. I think last season it was like a record low maybe for who was there at the offseason program. And that was probably a sign of what was to come. And it's not very surprising. They had a very late season. They went to the Super Bowl, didn't go how they wanted it, exhausting every imaginable way you could think of, right? So I think that was part of it. I think at the time I wanted to downplay that. That wasn't going to be a big deal. But we know what happened last year, and I think it had a lot to do with that. So now I'm very much encouraged by this resurgence, right? Like, a lot of these guys are in the building, and some of these guys who were on that team, right, and lived that firsthand are like, yeah, I'm ready to get back into it. I'm ready to be in the building with all these other guys. Again, just going based off of the vibes alone. They feel positive right now. So I think that's what the 49ers need going into this year. Because they need to ride the positivity, and they need to ride the good vibes to something, right? And hopefully something good. So, in addition to, Trent being there and alleviating my concerns, I think it also gives me a good feeling about where the team and the mindset is at for everyone else.
Ethan Paris says, I suggest we replace John Lynch saying convicted with Jason saying as well, too, for the drinking game. The problem is, Ethan, is that we do our show in the afternoon. And if we played this game, you'd probably have to go to the hospital. So I want to make sure that, if we were doing this show at maybe 8 p.m., might be a little bit easier, because then it would just be 1 hour of it. And then, you can just like fall into bed. But we can't have people, it's 1:28 on the West Coast being hammered because of something that I use as a way to connect my thoughts, when my brain's moving. So, yeah, I don't think that's safe. But
convicted.
Cam Inman tweeted out what John Lynch said about Trent Williams. Our entire team is almost here. We need that togetherness. We need that shared sacrifice. Everything is going well. Everything feels good right now, right? Everything feels like moving in the right direction, where the vibes are high, coming off an off season where the vibes weren't high for many reasons, right? All of a sudden, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey want to, get away with, with holding out. And then the Achilles thing, and Brandon Ayuk and all that stuff. The 49ers are still going to have their fair share of offseason drama. But today is a good day. Today's a very good day where we can just say, hey, this feels all right. And I think, again, it's about the shared idea that this team realizes that they need to get in here, fix everything, and get their continuity going, because they cannot afford to stumble out of the gates in any form or fashion. And I think that them having a shared mind with that, it makes me feel much better because it is important that the 49ers get off to a really good start. But I think them understanding the importance of that is making me feel a lot better.
And I think that same understanding has probably surrounded them in this whole draft process as well, in which they know like they need to have a strong draft. They're feeling that urgency, but it's like a positive urgency. We can use the word pressure, but pressure kind of has a negative connotation to it. I don't think they have negative feelings towards this draft and the pressure of it. I think they're excited and looking forward to it, especially after the draft they had last season. I think there's some momentum that they feel there in the building, probably, especially post Adam Peters. Like you almost like needed to have like a good draft to know, like, yeah, we could do it without this guy. Like, and they already probably knew that. I think that's more of a fan conversation, but I do think that that's part of the optimism and excitement around this season, and going into this week, the draft now as well. And as John Lynch mentioned, there's a huge emphasis on R&D, so research and data department, for their team. We already knew, like, their analytics, they lean into that pretty heavily. So that's something they really leaned on last year. It seems like it's going to be something big for them again this year. So Jay, like, this is probably the perfect segue to this last, kind of topic here, which is, and it's kind of a two-parter that I want to ask you. It's one, who do you think the 49ers are going to draft? And two, who do you want the 49ers to draft? Two different questions there. Ooh. Is it the same player?
Okay. So we are 2 days away. So we have to give our prediction at this point. We're not going to do another show until next week. And there's no other time to do a prediction. And we'll be on the draft stream as well, too, and we'll be able to react. So Aponte said the Super Bowl was all rigged for a Cheeks 3-peat. All right, man. I don't know what that has to do with anything. Man, the chat's is all over the place. Like we're literally like, on point talking about whatever. It's fine. Who do I think the 49ers are going to pick? I think it's Walter Nolan. And that's based on tea leaves, the idea that now Derek Harmon has medical issues and medical concerns. I do think that it's going to be Walter Nolan. In the wide nine, the idea is to have your defensive tackle eat up space and get those one-on-ones for edge players, right? But the 49ers have been missing that impactful defensive tackle who can do everything, pass rush and run defend, since Eric Armstead and DeForest Buckner, have left, right? They filled the defensive tackle gap with primarily a pass rusher, Malik Collins, or Javon Hargrave, and then Jordan Elliott can only stop the run. At least these are what they're known for. But having a defensive tackle that can do both, Nolan's very good against the run. I think he can brush up a little bit more on his pass rushing skill. But I think that's, again, if you believe in Chris Kasarik, then it has to be, hey, we're putting him in the hands of this guy so he can develop. I think it's going to be Walter Nolan. If I had my pick at 11, I don't know if he would be there, but I would love for them to have Mason Graham at 11. I think that's who I would want them to take because I have less concerns. I mean, well, look, it's now come out that the Jaguars themselves aren't going to take anybody, aren't really as high as him at 5. So
let me ask you this. So if he is not picked at 5, Mason Graham, and he falls like a couple spots, like you personally, like at what spot would you pick up the phone and try to move up for Mason Graham if he fell a few spots? Or do you kind of just take your chance? You're like, let's see if he gets to 11.
9? I mean, it depends because everything kind of changed on the board when Derek Carr's injury was brought to light. Because now that throws a monkey wrench into everything with the Saints. Because the Saints can stand pat, and if they reach on a quarterback, whoever it is, like let's, for instance, say Shador is there or something like that, or if they decide to roll with, Jackson Dart, I don't know if I agree with him being taken that high, but we've seen teams that are kind of desperately needing a quarterback just going and getting their guy and not having to worry about all that. 9 would probably be the spot, but it's tough to gauge because you do have to play the board. That's why any sort of shakeup, a reach, someone in the, Shamar Stewart goes to the Panthers at like number 5 or 6, wherever the Panthers are, then that really pushes the board down and it makes things a little bit more interesting. And then that's when you really have to put your glasses on and say, man, we really have to go up and get our guy, because we never thought it was going to be anywhere near, this position.
Right.
So who do I think they're going to take? I think they're going to take Walter Nolan. Who do I want them to take? I would love for it to be Mason Graham, but Mason Graham would have to fall substantially.
Yeah, there's 3 players that, I do think the 49ers could very much take at pick 11. But if I had to pick the one, I'm going to go Mykel Williams. I think if he's there, that's who they go with. The question is he going to be there? Like I said earlier, I think he probably more than likely goes at pick 9, unless the Saints do something crazy and throw in a wrench in there, or there's a wrench thrown in the earlier picks that we're not anticipating that could impact the picks that follow. I think Mykel Williams, based on not even just what John Lynch said today, I just think he has some of what I think the 49ers like in Shamar Stewart, but is safer. You don't necessarily have to teach him his position. He's got that down a little bit better than I think Shamar Stewart does at this point. There's certainly a little bit of development that he needs to do from the pass rushing standpoint, but his talent as a run defender, I think, provides a high floor for him. So I would like that. It would immediately improve this 49ers defense, one of the worst run defenses we've seen from this team in recent memory. So for a player who can make an impact there, I think would be huge. And so that would be who I think they would get if he was there. But I also can't ignore the fact that, you're hearing Shamar Stewart and Walter Nolan as well. So Nolan, I think, was a good guess by you. Who I want them to get, I mean, from those guys, I think Mykel I do like. I think Nolan, I would like Nolan. I like when watching both him and Mason Graham, I like Nolan better, honestly. And I get some of the concerns there with him. I think if he's in a situation that, would fit him, which I think the 49ers would fit him as far as how they would use him, as far as, the veteran presence that he's going to have around him, Fred, Nick Bosa, Chris Kosarek, he's going to have a good foundation there, I think, to have some success, and he would immediately improve your defensive line. He would be able to absorb those double teams. Sometimes he was even getting triple teamed. And I think he threatened opposing offenses in a way where you have to know where he's at all times. That is something that'd make a huge impact for this team, and not just for, himself, but the edge rushers as well. It would help them out a lot, and they probably get a lot more, one-on-one scenarios. So Walter Nolan, I think, would be the pick that I'd want.
I'd say my honorable mention is Jahad Campbell too. I just love the idea.
His medicals concern me.
It's a shoulder. Steffi's 20. He'll be fine.
Yeah, but I've heard other stuff too. So
yeah. Well, again, that's all in an effort to get the linebacker 1 dropped all the way back, right? Again, too. But again, we don't know, and I think that's what's important about the investigation that these front offices do, is because they have a grasp on their medicals. They understand all those things. But I'm just saying, in a perfect world, Jahad Campbell's shoulder doesn't hurt. There's nothing there, right, that you're concerned about. I would love to have him be Fred Warner's running mate, because it's literally like replacing Dre Greenlaw with someone who is very similar to him. I'm not going to say better, because that's a disrespect to Dre Greenlaw. But 2 things are certain. The 2 things that are going to be certain in 2 days when the 49ers make their selection. 1, whoever 49er fans are high on and want to be the pick, most likely it won't be. The 49ers board is completely different than what fans want. A la Ricky Pearsall at 31. Where's the psycho that mocked Ricky Pearsall to the 49ers in the first round? Find him, because he deserves some money. Find him. So that's your first thing. That's for sure. And 2, no matter who the pick is, some fans will be happy, some fans won't. And the discussion will continue to rage on. Those are your 2 certainties. The only 2 things that I know I can set my watch to is the 49ers board is drastically different than who 49er fans want for the pick. And some people will be happy, some people will not. And the discussion will rage on throughout the entire. See, this is what this week it really signifies. The turning point of talking about all of these picks and everything, and now having the players that are going to be there, and then the discourse turning into what these players can be. A lot of 49ers fans and sometimes content creators, analysts, every single pick you can make a case for, hey, that was a hell of a pick. We love it. Here's why it'll work. And then there'll be people that just don't like any of the picks. And the discourse will only grow. But this is a turning point, because now the conversation will shift from who should the 49ers have drafted to who have they drafted, how do they fit, and how you feel about it. And I think this is right now going to carry us before we get into that dead period before training camp and all of the organized team, activities and things like that. So this is the week. This is the week. And this week is going to be very fun based on just the discourse. And, people have strong opinions about who, they've evaluated, their draft prospects, what they think the 49ers need. And this is going to make this more exciting after a few weeks of things kind of feeling like it was just repetitive. Like, I don't have to keep getting on here and telling you I like Jalen Noel as a prospect. I like Kyle Williams. I like Jack Beck, and I like Will Johnson. Like, what's the point of saying that over and over again? It feels repetitive. Now we're getting to a point where we're going to know who's there, and we can explain to you why the 49ers, every single pick was a dog, like that video, right? Pick 11, dog, this guy, dog. Like, we're going to get to that point where every single pick we can talk ourselves into why that was a good pick.
Indeed. I think we got to wrap, but this has been fun, this NFL draft content. And don't forget that on Thursday, we'll be doing that live show. So make sure you guys are locked in with us, Gold Standard Network.
Yeah. And Rob better have his Yankee hat ready, because I want to make sure that we don't welch on this bet or anything like that, because I'm not going to let this, slide. But Steph's right. We got to get out of here. Thank you guys for tuning in again. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to wherever you get your audio podcast for the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Make sure you guys follow Steph on Twitter at Steph49K. Again, all of her great work with all the visits and everything. Steph puts in a lot of work, man. And, it's just great stuff. If you're not following her, you should be. We can kind of play, hey, did they visit? Hey, we think this is going to be the pick. I think that's the good way to do it. And then you can follow me on Twitter at JasonAponte2103. But for Steph, for Jay, we're out of here.
Peace.